Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live weekly chat. This is the most basic version of me you'll ever get. No makeup, hair not done. We're just rolling with it. I hadn't really planned to go live today, but then I kept getting the same news article sent to me by a whole bunch of people. So wanted to just chat with you. So I am Kari the Mortician, and we're talking all things funeral related. Good morning, Chris. If you'll notice, look, I took down the background, which means, do you want to see the secret? Boop. A little bit of patchwork needed because it did take off some of the wall. So that'll be getting an update here soon. Good morning, everybody. So I have gotten this news article from so many people this morning and from people in St. Louis because I have been to St. Louis and they know I've been down there. So what has happened is that a funeral home removal staff had gone to bring a woman into their care. She was in the back of the removal vehicle. They went to a convenience store. The story that I'm getting from all news sources so far is that the vehicle was left running with the keys in it. So even if it wasn't running and the keys were still in it, still very bad, while the individual went into the convenience store and it was stolen. So this couple, a man and a woman, stole the vehicle and they have yet to find the woman that was in the back, the deceased woman. So the question, who's at fault here? What's going to happen? I'm sure her family is freaking out. Their loved one was taken into the care of somewhere and now she's missing. So is she considered a missing person? Has she been kidnapped? Where do those lines really get drawn? Essentially, right now they've stolen property, which is the van, and technically kind of the woman inside, whether she's considered a person for legal standings or more property of the funeral home kind of thing. I know it sounds weird, but that is part of it. Now, where they could get into some serious trouble is what they do with her. If they take and they dispose of her, they injure her body at all, that is then a whole nother crime in its own. Just like as if somebody was in my care and I broke their arm to fit them in the casket, which I would never do. But if that was found to be true, I could have charges pressed against me for injury to a corpse. I hate the word corpse. I don't know why. And so there's things that these individuals who have taken this van and probably not knowingly took this woman, depending how they now move forward with this woman, could determine a lot for them. Because just stealing a van is not going to be this ginormous crime, probably. But what they do to that woman at this point is going to be big. Yeah, so if you just Google North St. Louis funeral home van stolen with woman in the back, I think is the title of the article that I've seen everywhere. So it's crazy, but it begs to question. I mean, just like a vehicle where maybe you leave your kid in the back and you step away to do something and the car gets stolen and there's a child in back. All of a sudden, somebody who is just trying to steal a car has basically kidnapping on them. So it's interesting, but it brings up a lot of questions still. Oh my gosh, JW. So JW, guys, he's here often. This happened 5 blocks from his house. That's crazy. Yeah, you'll have to keep me updated as you hear more too, guys, from down there. That's crazy. But this brings up the question about funeral home staff. So if we have somebody in the care of the funeral home and they're in the back of the vehicle, what is okay? Can you drive through a drive-through and get food? Do you stop and get gas? Do you go on an overnight? Because the thing is, we transport, where we will drive people from one state across several states to another state, because sometimes that is more cost effective than doing a flight. And sometimes families just feel better having them in the care of somebody from a funeral home rather than on a plane. So, it is quite a debate within the business, because some people say, well, you got to eat and you got to get gas and you got to do this and you have to sleep. and sometimes you just need coffee. But if you're not on a long road trip, do you just stop and get coffee in the hearse, even if there's nobody in it? Is that okay? So each business has their own kind of protocol, essentially, or you find out the protocol after you've done it and you didn't realize that was, not allowed, essentially. So, if you're going into the business, or if you're going into the business, find out what your employer, how they feel about some of that kind of stuff. But also, if you are out and about and you see a hearse at the McDonald's drive-thru, don't jump to the conclusion that somebody's just an arse and that they're just driving through the drive-thru. That person may have been driving all night trying to get to where they're going, bringing someone's loved one there. So just don't jump to conclusions and post silly memes and stuff. You never know what the situation is without knowing what the situation. You don't know unless you know, you don't know what you don't know. So don't assume you know something, and give a person the benefit of the doubt once in a while. Goodness. Diana, yeah, if they've got that van and she's back there, they obviously know at this point she's back there, and maybe they just dumped the van somewhere and they haven't found it yet. But yeah, that's rough. JW, so that's a great question. I'm not giving any legal advice, but can the family sue for this, or do they have grounds to? So here's the thing is, it would be one situation if the van had pulled up, the doors were locked, and they had broken into this vehicle and then stole it. But it sounds like the keys were left in it running open with this woman in the back while they vacated. So it doesn't look good for the funeral home because this was the situation. And if the funeral home is local and the removal was local, why are you stopping at the convenience store? I don't know the answers. I'd love to hear what the answers are, because maybe there is a scenario that I just don't know what the answer is. Maybe they thought they were running in from some directions really quick or something where they lost. I don't know. Unfortunately, it's a sad, sad situation all around for everybody. On a long trip, do they need dry ice? No, because typically they're going to be embalmed, and it's going to depend on the state lines that you have to cross. So let's say I drive from Michigan to Florida. Every state I traverse through, I need to find out if I have to have the deceased embalmed to go into or out of that state. There are some states you might have to be embalmed to go into, but not out of, or not into, but you do out of. So if you go into that state unembalmed, you're supposed to be embalmed leaving that state. So you have to find out what each state laws are. I would hope, Connor, that they would be able to find it easily, but if they break out the windows, because it looks like the insignia is only on the windows, if I'm remembering correctly. So if they break out a window, is it really that identifiable? Because I don't think I saw the logo on the side of it. Paul, your boss would flame you if you ever did that. Oh my goodness. Hello, Kari. I want to be cremated, but worry that I might be in a deep sleep instead of dead. Well, typically there is a wait time, like 48 hours at least-ish, that before they even get permits and stuff. So if you're in that deep of a sleep, I don't know why you would be in that deep of a sleep. You're most likely not going to sleep for that many days in a row. But it is a very common, very, very common fear that you are sleeping and you wake up miraculously when you go into the retort or something, and then they don't know that you're in there and you die being cremated. Yeah, I'm sure it's horrible. I saw on the Netflix show The Staircase that the removal team stayed in a motel and left the body in the hearse overnight in the car park. Is this allowed? I guess the driver has to sleep. Well, and that's the thing, is if you're on these long trips, you've got to sleep. So typically you'll park in the back, you lock everything up, you would leave the deceased. I know, was it Kevin Watts in his book recently? Was that him who, when he was over an overnight, he had the cot and had the person and he brought it in the room with him because he just didn't feel comfortable leaving them in the car. So, you do what you're comfortable with. Yeah, Paul is saying it takes about 2 days or so for us to even get a cremation permit. It's quite a lengthy process, and families get pissed. It's interesting because sometimes families come in and they say, "Oh, has mom already been cremated?" Well, nobody's even signed anything. But the assumption is that when somebody walks into the funeral home, often that they're going to get the death certificates right then. They're going to get the cremated remains right then, and that everything happens really quickly. I blame movies for this misinformation because there's all these things in movies that show you that things take place in this time period. Like when you show up, this is the one that kills me every time, guys. Bad pun there, I guess. The one that gets me every time is when you have a funeral. It's often always outside, often always a graveside when it's in movies. And the headstone is already there and engraved. No, come on. A headstone does not get there and engraved within like 3-4 days. It just doesn't happen. So every time I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not even plausible. But, it makes for good TV. I had a friend who was transporting a person who was in an accident. Hers was very damaged, but 2 vehicles back was another funeral director who transferred the body into his van to transport. So that is exactly why if you see any publicized funeral, there will be 2 hearses. There'll be one in the front that has the deceased, and there'll be one towards the back. And that is if the hearse breaks down, if there's an accident, if anything happens that they need to then move along, get another hearse in there, and keep going. You're not going to wait for somebody to go back to the funeral home, get one, and bring them in if you're on TV or if it's publicized at all. So you have that backup vehicle, and that's why they do that, is for that specific reasoning. Now, I got a message from Mac. He said, do you plan to do chats with Lauren and Joelle, Brian and Ryan, your friends at W. Uden and Sons? Those are some of my favorite segments where you cover timely subjects with your colleagues. I have a new series that I've started recording with Brian and Ryan, and I cannot land on a name. I am challenged right now trying to come up with the catchiest name for this new series. Lauren and Joelle, I just talked to Lauren yesterday, just talked to Joelle today. We talk all the time, but our schedules are all over the place, and getting us to align has been really difficult. We've had a couple video concepts, and then we get up to it and something's going on personally with one of us or professionally, and it just doesn't work out. So we talk all the time. They are some of the truest, most loveliest people to me, and we just haven't lined up for a video lately. And Uden and Sons, gosh, they had great coverage last week in the news over in England, and it made its way across the sea too, and hit some of our news over here about all the work they're doing. So I've got another Caitlin and me video that'll be playing at some point as well. Working and doing collaborations with other people in the business is one of the best ways for me to learn and to help get a broader range of information for you as viewers. I mean, my interaction is with kind of what goes on here in my area, but I don't have composting in my state right now. Who does? Head out west. So, I'm going to have to collaborate with people to bring you information about all the new stuff going on, because it's just not happening where I am. Aside from being swamped in the population centers, how are funeral homes evolving with the C-19 pandemic? A lot of places were, as hospitals did, you kind of geared up for what the busyness that was coming, and it didn't get as busy last spring in some areas as it did this fall. So it's hit different areas harder during different time periods. So that's been interesting to see what people have done preemptively, building coolers, getting more available space in their funeral homes, just kind of getting prepared for what might be coming. And then also handling working with the families. It is really difficult to be the no people right now when you want to be the yes people. So like right now in Michigan, we're still at 25 people capacity for a funeral. And checking with legal, it's not supposed to be rotating. It's supposed to be at one time, but it's really hard when you see other funeral homes down the road that are allowing however many they want, or they're rotating and they're not sticking to the rules. And it's just like, and it gets frustrating because you want to feel like you're all in things together, but then you see different funeral homes operating differently, not under the specific guidelines, or you read obituaries from people that are the legal people and their own family members die, and then they have open to the public visitations and things, and it kind of goes against what, it's that do as I say, not as I do, which we've seen in all different realms during this, which is frustrating, I think, when you're trying to be rule abiders and stuff. So I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble for saying any of this. Who knows? But definitely seeing a lot more burial now, where in the beginning it was a lot more direct cremation. Yes, casket companies are being challenged right now, but doing great things by upgrading for free caskets if they don't have them in stock and stuff. So flipping over to some of your questions now. I once got yelled at because the grave was ugly. First off, I'm a funeral director, not the grave digger. Also, who the heck cares? It's really not that important. Well, it was important to somebody. I mean, it's dirt and it's a grave. So you can only make it so pretty. But that's interesting. 3 to 4 months would be phenomenal. Kari, first time watching you live. Hi, welcome, Marcia. You are somebody who had emailed, and I was going to read your email. Because Marcia had asked, how do I catch you live? You just have to kind of catch me. I am a little all over the place. My schedule does not allow me to be completely consistent with when I do live. Right now I'm doing them on Fridays in the mornings-ish, but I know that a different segment of people can watch later in the afternoon. So sometimes I just do an afternoon one for getting to get a different group of people in on that live. I know I've got different time zones watching, and I want to try and accommodate different ones as well. And I like to do evening ones once in a while because that's really fun. I get a totally different segment of people, which is nice. When my husband died 17 years ago, can I assume the man who met with us was the same who embalmed dressed him? He was very good. I wouldn't say assume. It depends on the size of the funeral home. In some funeral homes, the person that does the removal, the embalming, the dressing, the arranging, the funeral, they could be all different men and women. So you may have so many different people in as part of that event for you, depending on the size of the funeral home. Sadie Mae, hi. Oh, that's a fun name to say. I want to envision that you're Southern, and I don't know, Sadie Mae. I love it. Welcome. How do you prepare people who may be disabled to say goodbye to loved ones? I'm an autistic adult. How do you prepare people? Do you mean like how do I talk to them beforehand to get them ready to go into a visitation? I'm not quite sure which side of the question you're looking at. Leonard, I live in Michigan, and the funeral home in town only allows the immediate family at wakes. So right now, Leonard, yeah, it's only 25 people. So that often is just the immediate family. I mean, you get some families that have 10 children, and what do? Just them and their significant others is 20, and then a couple grandkids, and you're at capacity. So it really doesn't give for a lot for even immediate family. Good morning, Kari. Just wanted to hop on here and say have a great day. Thanks for answering so many questions and sharing. Hey, Megan. Hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you so much. Have you ever embalmed a person? Yes. I would like to say probably, more than hundreds at this point in my years. It just like, I kind of preface everybody the same that's going into visitation and services. If you have questions, let me know. If somebody, I'm going to talk to children one way, and depending on the level of autism and level of mental capacity of anybody I'm talking to, even an adult, it might be more of a conversation in basicness that I would have with more of a child or a teen or something, where I will just explain a little bit, let them kind of do their thing. The more you talk, the more you're putting your own thoughts and feelings into somebody. And you really need to let people of any age come up with their own thoughts and feelings about the event in the moment and a funeral and a visitation. Because if you put your fear in them or your way of thinking, that's not really fair for them. But that's why a lot of kids grow up with fears, is because their parents were fearful of funerals. And so I always say, I always say, make sure to ask me questions. If you're wondering about anything with a casket or with their clothing or anything, just ask. And sometimes if I see kids trying to peek for feet, because kids will try and peek to see if they can see their feet, I will go in and I will go, do you want to look at their toes? And I'll like lift the things so they can peek. My mom always yells at me if we're at like a visitation together and it's not my funeral home, and I put myself into the situation just because. Anish, no, I'm sorry. I will not be your Valentine forever, but I appreciate the question. There is a Gravedigger group on Facebook that has thousands of members. You'd like it if you want to do that. Okay, I'll have to look for that one. Good morning, great girl, Michelle. You're welcome, Gemma. Good morning, Wia. I don't know how to say that. It is hard to see a kiddo's grave. I think it hurts. Paul says, I think it hurts me more when I see adults' grave. It's just something that sticks different in my heart. It is hard to see kids, but they're so resilient. Like truly, they bounce back in front of you from the loss, because unfortunately, they don't get the longevity. So they're going to go in this hard loss moment and then bounce right back out. And then they're going to go into it again a week later when they realize that the person's not there, and then come back out and then go in again. And eventually they'll stay there just for a little bit longer. But it's completely unlike us grieving that and feeling that loss, because they don't realize how forever it is. So it is hard. Leonard Stark, yes, it is a law in Michigan that a licensed funeral home must have its own equipment to operate a funeral home, even if if they have a trade person coming in. However, it only has to be minimum. You have to have, like, I think it's the machine and an aspirator and ventilation and a table or something for you to be called a funeral home in terms of the embalming aspect. But you can be a chapel without having an operating funeral home, as long as one of your locations has an operating funeral home, prep room. So some of that is like these, not gray areas, but they are these segues to some of that stuff that can make it so you don't have to have an operating one at every single location that you have. Did you see on the news a man working at a funeral home took a nap at the funeral? Yeah, that's not news. That's a fake news article. It's been running around, and it changes the name of the place when it goes out and blasts. It's all fake, not happening, not real. Is it morbid to watch funerals on TV, on YouTube, if you don't know them? A little morbid, but curious, interested is one thing. Why you're watching them is what I would question. Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for maybe a piece about something that maybe they'll say at that funeral? Or yeah. Hello in the Philippines. That's super fun. Thanks. So yeah, I grabbed my hat. Have you worked with clay in the face of facial reconstruction? We don't use clay. We use a lot of wax, sometimes plaster of Paris, things like that, but clay, not clay. You're welcome, Anita. Kari, would you recommend being a trade embalmer or stick with a company? It really depends how you want to work. If you're going to do trade, I would say try to get a teammate with you so that you can get some time off, because the thing is, trade work is 24/7, and you get to where you don't want to say no because you're almost afraid they're never going to call you again. And so if you have a schedule with maybe another team member that you can have some time off during the week and have like every other weekend off or something and come up with a good schedule for yourself, that's really the best way to do trade. Trade work can be really good business. It can be really good money, but it is very demanding. And some areas do have unions for trade, and that can be good or bad. Just like when I was in England talking over with some people about how much they made as trade embalmers and at different places, and compared to what I could make as a trade embalmer, it was less than half, because they had to be paid only certain amounts. It was really weird. Some of the structure I didn't quite understand, but yeah, Leonard. So they don't necessarily have to have a functioning prep room at every single one of them. If some of them are just labeled as a chapel. Chicago Wolves fan. Hey, Kari, my dad died. I'm sorry. How long ago did he die? Paul is asking, I know this may be old, but could you quickly touch on Swanson Funeral Home in Flint? Being a Black funeral director, it really made me kind of feel sad that that's the reputation they set up for us. I don't feel like, see, that's the thing, is I don't know why we have to look at it as a Black funeral home situation just because the owner was Black. It's just a funeral home. It doesn't need to be a black or white thing. But if I'm remembering correctly, Swanson, it was the one that they were called, the police and stuff were called in because there were some smells, and they had found that they had rotten bodies out in the garage that they were just holding forever. And I believe, wasn't it the case they were just waiting for payment and stuff, and they would just hold them, but they didn't have cooler or anything, and it was hot and stuff. Am I remembering the right funeral home, Paul? Yeah, great girl. It is a wide variety of questions this morning. It's harder and sadder to see kids grieve because I think of what they've lost in their future. I volunteer facilitate at a grief support group for children who have lost a parent in death. Marcia, it is, it's that anticipatory grief that so many people go through, what life could have been if you hadn't lost. And I think everybody can touch on anticipatory grief from what they went through this last year, because everybody lost something this last year that they were looking forward to, whether it was a trip or going to school or just going to dinner and you couldn't go to dinner. Everybody kind of lost that freedom, that ability, that adventure that maybe they had, along with maybe a death. And so I think everybody can connect to what that feeling is of being sad for what never was. It's not like you truly lost it, but you lost the opportunity for it. So it is, that part of it is hard. And that's kind of what that loss is when you lose a person, is you have all this anticipatory grief for the rest of your life when you think about, oh, but my so-and-so could have been here for this, and so could have been here for this. A lot of those big moments are graduation and wedding and things like that. My father-in-law recently passed. My husband and I went to the funeral home to view him before his direct cremation. We were caught off guard because his lips were glued. Was it done for the sake of the brief viewing, or is that usually done before someone is cremated? It was done for the viewing, I'm assuming. Typically only if we get somebody ready for viewing would we close their eyes, close their mouth, get them ready in that essence. So we wouldn't set features if nobody was going to be viewing them typically. Where am I from? I'm in Southwest Michigan. Yeah, Paul. It was a bad situation, but it's hard. Yeah. Paul, I believe you've been to the funeral home that I work at, but at that point I wasn't working there. Now I'm curious, Paul, where you work. Do you know the original reason flowers were sent to a funeral? So Marshall, flowers are the literally oldest funeral tradition. The oldest graves that they have found had flowers laid in with the person. And they are just the oldest tradition of funerals that you could never get, you just can't get away from. It doesn't matter if you threaten people in an obituary and say, don't send flowers, blah, blah, blah. Somebody's going to send flowers because it's what we innately know to do to show sympathy to people without being invasive. You can send something without having to pick up the phone, talk to the people who have had the loss. You just send the flowers and you feel as if you've done something that way. We had a 15-year-old girl and her friend that passed 2 weeks ago. It was very sad. The family couldn't pay for it at all, so they had donations. There are a lot of situations that are just tragic ones, and they're just ones of at need. So it's unfortunately, when it comes to paying for funerals and stuff, the bad have ruined it for the good, where you have a situation where people truly need, but you have people who can afford something, but they want more than they can afford. So then they make a big deal that they don't have enough money and blah, blah, blah. But then you get a family who truly just needs money to just take care of the individual on a basic level. And they have a hard time getting it because other people have already, I don't know. That was a really rambly way of trying to explain something. I'll come up with a better way to explain that. I lost my mom at age 15. I missed her on her birthday. I missed her when my children were born. Oh, goodness, I bet. Those are big moments to want your mom there for. Steve, that is likewise here. What we do in America too is we say, in lieu of flowers, please do a donation to, or the family has asked for donations to, but people, by golly, still send flowers. I work at Harper Funeral Home. Oh, very cool. Yeah, the Harpers are super nice people. I've never encountered you. I'll have to stop over and say hi. I do freelance work though, so I work at several different funeral homes around the area as well still. That's very cool. Yeah, the Harpers, I don't know if I've seen them for a while. We used to run into them at the local MFDA conventions, and not conventions, the local meetings and stuff way back. But I'll have to stop over, say hi. Have you totally 100% lost your fear of being around dead bodies and handling them, or is there still a part of you that's a little scared? I don't think I'm fearful of the deceased. Could I sleep in a room full of them? I would like to think I could, unless I let my mind get the better of me. I mean, I've slept in funeral homes that have the deceased downstairs. I don't know if I'd put a cot in the middle of a whole bunch of, people on tables around me. I guess maybe I could for a challenge, but that seems crazy. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. What could Kari do it? I don't know. Oh, great girl. Amen. That's so true. It started with GoFundMe. Yeah. When everybody starts asking for money for every little thing, I don't know, it's a generational thing. Oh, I want to do a shout out to Miss Hannah too. Desiree's daughter. Hello, Miss Hannah. She's a little girl in Illinois. So hello. Flowers were to hide the smell of the body. Yes, that's part of it. I think back in the day is that if you bring flowers in, they'll kind of mask what's going on with the person. It was kind of something, they were already there typically, but when you do more of them, not just put some in when they go in the grave. I think there's a huge history of flowers with funerals that I would like to look into and delve into. It'll be a lot of research and stuff, but it would be really interesting to know the full history of flowers at a funeral. Have you ever had someone play dead? No. No playing dead happening that I know of, which is an interesting question. Some of you have been ordering mugs. I will be getting to those here beginning of next week. So just give me a reprieve on my ordering, but I'll get those all sent out the beginning of next week for everybody. I thought when using the trocar that it would disintegrate your internal organs, since the internal organs, heart and everything were being punctured, that they are sucked out. So it doesn't necessarily eviscerate them. They get injected with straight embalming fluid. So when you're aspirating, it is a large kind of a needle. It's a trocar, but it has a point and there's some holes on the side. So you're puncturing and opening them up and hopefully sucking out any fluids and things. Yes, you get some tissue, but very small holes in the trocar that things are going in. It's not like a big tube. So you can't rip apart an internal organ that much to suck out the whole thing. You're literally just puncturing it several times. And then when you put the fluid in, that is allowing that fluid to permeate through all of the internal organs. I've been doing state videos, guys. I'm getting so close. However, I really need an Alaska. Alaska. Anybody from Alaska? This is the state I don't know that I've heard anybody reach out to me from. Alaska. Thank you, USA 365. Got a support. I went to a field office and got a hat on an adventure. Yeah, Buried with the Bernards. I have a real hard time with some of the reality stuff that looks way over the top for TV, and I just don't know about it. I feel like sometimes it gives us a bad name. I haven't even seen it. I don't know, but because of the reality shows of the past that were based at funeral homes, it makes me really skeptical. All right. All right, I will have to go read that. Paul is recommending The Life of Death by Ralph Is it Russell? Russell Funeral Home in Flint. Okay, is it Russell or Rosell? Number 1 or number 2? Russell, number 1, Rosell, number 2. Steve, are you in Alaska? If you are donating a deceased loved one to a medical school, does the body get embalmed? They get prepared and they get preserved. It is not a true, it's the definition of embalming, but the same chemicals are not used. Does the funeral home take body parts out that the dead person wants to donate? No. If there's a donation, that is done by the procurement team. So in Michigan, it's Gift of Life, and that's done there. And that's where it's donated from. Many internal organs can only be donated when the person has a brain or is brain dead. So they're actively in motion and they're removed while they're still viable in that way. Otherwise, typically it's maybe like corneas, inner ears can be donated, skin, heart valves, things of that nature following death that can be donated. My niece and a former employee of mine live in North Pole, Alaska. Oh, that's so funny. But it's -23 up there right now. Yeah, I'm out. I'm out. It's 16 here today and I'm good. That's too cold. I don't like cold. So I love the changing seasons, but cold. Yikes. Carl will email me and tell them to ask me 3 questions. Well, Steve, you can't ask me England. You can't ask me Alaska questions. If you're in England, you could ask me questions when I do countries, and you could be an England questioner. But I need somebody in Alaska to ask me 3 questions. What order is the procurement done? My husband donated skin, bones, cornea. Was that done before or after the autopsy? He died suddenly of a heart attack. Did they do an autopsy, Marcia? They may not have done an autopsy. Neither do I thought they were crazy to move up there. I'll get them to message us sometime on here. Yeah, have them email me, Kari@KariNorthey.com. My email's always in the description of the video after the video posts, so that would be awesome. So if he had an autopsy, what is typically done is the procurement and then the autopsy. So he would have donated his cornea and what did you say? Cornea, bones, and skin. So they would have typically taken that before the medical examiner. I always thought it would be the other way around, but a lot of studies have been done and it shows that it's okay to do it that way. So that's how it's done, at least by our local place in Michigan, is they do the donation items first and then the autopsy. Do you have planning packets on your sale for site? I'm trying to plan in advance, so I want to make sure I'm not forgetting. I do. If you go to my website, karinorthey.com, there is a link for a funeral arrangement packet, and it's $6. And it's a 12-page planning document, and I'll email you the PDF of it. I'll put a link to that actually in this video once it posts as well. Hey, Nancy in Scotland. I have not, do I need somebody in North Carolina? Not for the video, Bryson. Is Kitty Hawk in North Carolina? Outer Banks. Is that North Carolina or is that South Carolina? I've been there. But beyond that, I've been out to the Outer Banks long ago. I couldn't even tell you where I was. I remember I drove by the one monster truck, the grave digger, in the front yard of the place where the guy lives or something, and saw it and thought that was cool on my drive out to go where I was. If that's not the most random story for you guys. All right, guys. Okay, I'll just say it. Autopsy bodies are so hard to embalm, at least in my opinion. So, Paul, I think opposite. And I just said this the other day, especially if there's trauma or anything. When somebody's autopsied, you don't have to worry about what's disconnected, so to speak, because your vessels are kind of boom, boom, boom. Your leg, your arm, up into the head. Sometimes you have to do a little work to make sure the closure inside is connected. But to me, it seems a little bit easier. It takes more work, a lot more suturing, but I feel like because you can see where things are and go directly to them, to me, it's almost a little easier. Judas is asking, last month, a sports car rammed into the back of a sugarcane truck, instantly killing the 3 passengers. One had his eyeball popped out. Can you put it back in? If they have the eyeball, we can put it back in. If they didn't, I mean, a lot of times I would guess they're going to just put it in with the viscera at the autopsy. And so I would use a replacement in the eye socket. I would pack it with cotton and stuff and use an eye cap. Ryan, have you ever been in a situation where you had a crazy snowstorm and had a burial? What did you do? A few years ago, we got like a stupid amount of inches. It was like 20 some inches in like 20 some hours. It was so crazy how much snow we got. But the burials happened still that day. There was not attendees really. Some of the family made it, but we still went ahead with the burials. I'm sure some got delayed that day because families wanted to delay and stuff, but they did go forward. You know, I keep saying it's like the Postal Service, nor rain, nor sleet, nor snow. We keep on going. So am I an undercover agent? I'm worried now. Well, if I was undercover for the FBI, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't sit here with an FBI hat on. That would be kind of a, you know, giving up my undercoverness. All right, guys, I'm going to wind off. Thank you for joining. Watch for those links in the video. In the description of the video, there'll be a link for that arrangement funeral book. If you'd like to purchase that, you can always get mugs and stuff. I'll do one big shipment next Monday. I'll send out everybody's mugs that have purchased because I've had some orders this week. And yeah, make sure you click subscribe if you don't subscribe so you can check out the next video. This is not probably my most stellar video with my oh, what day is it? It's Friday, isn't it? It's a Friday. Thank you guys so much. Paul, you and we should just grab coffee one day or something even. So since you're local, I love it. I think that's awesome. You guys have a good weekend. Have a really good time. Make sure to email questions you'd like me to ask or answer in the next videos, and make sure to watch for new videos coming next week. Bye, guys.